the best of it is that our time initially, when the whole thing was opening up, was there were no charts, there were no maps.
He was the golden god, the voice that powered the biggest rock band in the world. With his lion's mane of hair, a stage presence that was part Viking warrior and part mythical deity, and a voice that could shatter glass or soothe a soul, Robert Plant had it all. He stood at the very top of the mountain of fame, the embodiment of the rock and roll dream. A life of endless adoration, sold-out stadiums, and legendary excess. But today at 77, his life is a world away from that stage. The roaring crowds have been replaced by the quiet solitude of the English countryside. The frantic energy of world tours has given way to long walks through misty forests and evenings in local pubs. The reason for this staggering transformation isn't just about getting older. It's a story carved by devastating tragedies, events, so profound they forced him to question everything, dismantle the myth of the golden god, and leave the rock and roll circus behind in search of something more. You think you know Robert Plant, but you have no idea. To understand the quiet man Robert Plant is today, you first have to grasp the colossal figure he once was. In the late 1960s, a musical storm was brewing in England. Guitarist Jimmy Page, already a seasoned session musician, was building a new group from the ashes of the Yardbirds. He found his bassist in the hugely talented John Paul Jones and his drummer in a powerhouse named John Bonham. But they needed a voice that could match the thunderous, blues-drenched, heavy sound they were creating. Bonham recommended a friend of his, a charismatic singer with an untamed wail and a deep love for American blues, a young man named Robert Plant. From their very first rehearsal, the chemistry wasn't just there, it was explosive. Plant later remembered feeling intimidated standing next to the accomplished Page and Jones, but when they kicked into their first song, something overwhelming was born. They called themselves Led Zeppelin, and they were about to conquer the world. Their rise wasn't just fast, it changed music forever. Led Zeppelin didn't just play rock and roll, they redefined it. They blended heavy blues, English folk, psychedelic rock, and a sense of mythic grandeur into a sound that was completely their own. And at the forefront of it all was Plant. He wasn't just a singer, he was the front man. On stage, he was a spectacle of raw, untethered energy. With his shirt unbuttoned, his tight jeans, and that cascade of golden curls, he created the archetype of the rock god that countless others would try to copy for decades. His voice was an instrument of incredible power and range. He could unleash a primal scream that felt like it could shake the foundations of an arena, and in the next moment, deliver a tender, folk-infused lyric with haunting delicacy. He wrote lyrics steeped in fantasy, drawing from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, Welsh mythology and ancient legends, creating a mystique that set Zeppelin apart. Songs like Stairway to Heaven, Kashmir, and Whole Lotta Love weren't just hits, they were cultural touchstones, the anthems of a generation. The band's success was staggering. Albums sold in the tens of millions. Their tours were the biggest in the world, breaking attendance records set by the Beatles. They flew in a private jet nicknamed the Starship, a symbol of their untouchable status. They were the kings of the 1970s, and Robert Plant was their golden-haired king. He was young, handsome, and seemingly invincible, but the higher you climb, the further you have to fall. And the universe was about to teach him just how fragile that invincibility really was. August 4th, 1975. Led Zeppelin was on a much-needed break from the chaos of a world tour. Robert Plant was vacationing with his wife Maureen and their children, Karak and Carmen, on the beautiful Greek island of Rhodes. It was supposed to be an idyllic escape. Plant rented a car, and as they drove the island's roads, the unimaginable happened. He lost control of the vehicle, which spun off the road, and crashed. The aftermath was horrific. While the kids escaped with bruises, Robert and Maureen were severely injured. Plant suffered a broken ankle and a shattered elbow. His wife, Maureen, was even more gravely wounded, with a fractured skull and a broken pelvis. Lying there broken, Plant knew they needed better medical care than what was available locally. In a move he later said saved his wife's life, he paid to have them airlifted back to England. For a man whose entire identity was built on movement and stage presence, the consequences were devastating. The rest of Led Zeppelin's tour dates were cancelled. Plant's recovery was agonizingly slow, and for months he was confined to a wheelchair, a humbling contrast to the swaggering frontman the world knew. Doctors even questioned if he would walk properly again. The band's next album, Presence, was recorded while Plant was still in this state. He had to sing his vocals from the wheelchair, his body broken but his spirit defiant. The experience profoundly changed him. It was the first time the unstoppable train of Led Zeppelin had been violently derailed by a random, cruel twist of fate. It was a brutal reminder of his own mortality. The pain and reflection of this period bled into the music. Achilles' Last Stand, a 10-minute epic from Presence, was directly inspired by his ordeal. The title itself is a poignant reference to the mythological hero whose only vulnerability was his heel, a fitting metaphor for a rock star whose legs, a source of his power on stage, had been so severely compromised. He would walk and command the stage again, but something had shifted. The illusion of invincibility was shattered. It was a harrowing experience, but it was only a prelude to the most life-altering tragedy still waiting around the corner. By the summer of 1977, Led Zeppelin was back on top, on another triumphant tour of the United States. The machine was at full power again, and the Golden God was restored to his throne. But on July 26, 1977, he received a phone call from his wife, Maureen. The first call said their 5-year-old son, Karak, was sick. A second call came soon after. Karak was gone. He had died from a sudden and aggressive stomach virus. He was only 5 years old. The world just stopped. In an instant, the screaming fans, the music, the fame, it all became meaningless noise. The tour was cancelled immediately, and Plant rushed home to be with his shattered family. The death of a child is a pain beyond words. For Plant, it was a cataclysm that reordered his universe, leaving him with bottomless grief and torturous guilt. He later opened up about this dark period, questioning the life he was leading. "I'd spent so much time trying to be a decent dad," he said, "but at the same time I was really attracted to what I was doing in Zeppelin. So when he bowed out, I just thought, what's it all worth? What's that all about? Would it have been any different if I was there? If I'd been around?" This question haunted him. The life of a touring rock star now felt like a foolish pursuit that had kept him from his family when it mattered most. He seriously considered quitting music for good, thinking about training to be a teacher to find a quiet, normal life. In the darkest moments, it was his bandmate, drummer John Bonham, who refused to let him disappear. Living just a few miles apart, Bonham and his wife Pat were magnificent, offering constant support. Bonham would often show up at Plant's house, put on a chauffeur's hat, and take his grief-stricken friend out, just to get him out of the house. It was this deep friendship that slowly pulled Plant back from the brink. He did eventually return to the band, but he was a changed man. The flamboyant, golden god was gone, replaced by a more somber, introspective soul. This profound loss would echo through his music for the rest of his life. On Led Zeppelin's final studio album, In Through the Outdoor, he wrote the song All My Love as a direct tribute to his son. It was a departure from their usual hard rock, a poignant song about a love that endures beyond loss. He would write other songs about Karak in later years, including I Believe. As he put it, every now and again he turns up in songs, for no other reason than I miss him a lot. The story of how Robert Plant rebuilt his life is one of incredible resilience. It's a journey from the world's biggest stages to the quietest corners of his own heart. If you're finding this story compelling and want to hear more tales from rock history, consider subscribing to our channel. After the loss of his son, Robert Plant's return to Led Zeppelin was tentative. The band regrouped in 1978 to record In Through the Outdoor, an album that reflected the seismic shifts in their lives. The tone was more subdued, and Plant's heartbreak was a palpable presence. They planned a tour for the new album, but the rock and roll lifestyle had developed a much darker edge. For drummer John Bonham, the pressures of fame were taking a heavy toll, manifesting in a severe dependence on alcohol. On September 24, 1980, the band gathered for rehearsals. Bonham had been drinking heavily all day. After rehearsals, the band retired to Jimmy Page's house, where Bonham eventually passed out and was put to bed. The next day he couldn't be woken. John Bonham, the thunderous heart of Led Zeppelin, was dead at the age of 32 from alcohol poisoning. For Plant, this was the final blow. Bonham wasn't just his drummer. He was his friend from the beginning, his compatriot. It was Bonham who had pulled him out of his grief after Carrack died. "I drove down with him on the day of the rehearsal," Plant later recalled, "and I drove back without him. I do miss him." The loss was absolute, and the band's decision was immediate. There was no Led Zeppelin without John Bonham. On December 4, 1980, they released a statement announcing the end of the band. "We wish it to be known that the loss of our dear friend and the deep respect we have for his family, together with the sense of undivided harmony felt by ourselves and our manager, have led us to decide that we could not continue as we were." For Plant, replacing Bonham was unthinkable. "There's absolutely no point," he would say years later. "There are certain people you don't do without in life. You don't keep things going for the sake of it. There's no functional purpose for keeping things going." He saw the band as a unique chemistry of 4 people, and with one gone, the formula was broken forever. The grand, roaring airship of Zeppelin had come to a final halt. The Golden God was, once and for all, earthbound. He now faced a daunting question: who was Robert Plant without Led Zeppelin? The journey to answer that would lead him further away from rock superstardom and deeper into a world of quiet exploration. In the wake of Led Zeppelin's end, Robert Plant felt lost. He later admitted, "At the end of 1980, I had no place to go." The 1980s had arrived with the slick gloss of MTV, and the colossal swagger of Zeppelin felt like a past life. He started small, forming a band called the Honey Drippers and playing in little clubs, just to feel the joy of music again. His early solo albums like Pictures at 11 and The Principle of Moments were successful, but showed him consciously moving away from the Zeppelin sound. He even adopted the look of the era, admitting with a laugh, "I had a mullet, and I had to cut the sleeves off my shirt, and I thought I made it again. It was like the second coming." But underneath, he was grappling with his own legacy, feeling a disconnect from the person he'd been. The pressure to reunite Led Zeppelin was relentless. While there were a few brief reunions for events like Live Aid, Plant steadfastly refused a full-scale revival. He didn't want to be a jukebox, endlessly replaying the hits of his youth. He said that musicians from his era who just kept touring old hits started to look sadly decrepit, like people hanging onto a life raft. His search for a new truth led him to an unexpected and career-redefining collaboration. In 2007, he joined forces with bluegrass superstar Alison Krauss. Their album, Raising Sand, was a masterpiece of subtlety and restraint. Produced by T-Bone Burnett, it was a collection of dusty, atmospheric covers. For Plant, it was a revelation. He learned a new vocal discipline from Krauss, whose precise harmonies were the polar opposite of his wild style. He recalled being tutored by Allison, who would get on the talkback in the studio and ask, "Robert, why don't you sing the same thing twice?" The album was a massive success, winning an astonishing 5 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year. It was a vindication of his long journey. He had successfully reinvented himself by delving deep into the roots of American music, finding a new voice that was quieter, more mature, but just as powerful. It was the rebirth he'd been searching for. For a man who once bestrode the world's stages, Robert Plant's life today is defined by a profound sense of peace. He resides not in a rock star mansion in Hollywood, but in the heart of the Worcestershire countryside, in a village called Shatterford, not far from where he grew up. This is a conscious choice to live a grounded existence. His estimated net worth is around 200 million, a fortune built on a legendary career. Yet he lives a life that is humble by celebrity standards. Locals frequently see him at nearby pubs, farmers' markets, and walking the trails of the Wyre Forest. He's not a recluse, but part of the community, a man who finds more value in a quiet pint than in a VIP lounge. This choice is the culmination of his life's journey. After the monumental success of the one-off Led Zeppelin reunion show in London, in 2007, a performance hailed as a triumph, the pressure for a full tour was immense, with astronomical offers. But Plant walked away. Instead of attending lavish after-parties, he went to a small pub, had a few drinks, and went to bed. "I had to get away from it," he explained. "It was too heavy." That decision baffled many, but it made perfect sense for the man he had become. To him, going back to being the lead singer of Led Zeppelin felt like a regression. "I don't want to be a jukebox," he has stated repeatedly. He finds his creative spirit now in exploring new musical landscapes with bands like the sensational Space Shifters and, more recently, Saving Grace. He prefers smaller gigs to a stadium tour with some old mates because, as he put it, we could mess about. That freedom, the freedom to be an artist rather than an icon, is what he values above all else. Those rich places are found in the quiet of his Worcestershire home and the nature he loves. "This is where I belong," he once said. "The things that matter to me are here. My family, my memories, my quiet." So, is Robert Plant's life truly sad? If you measure a life by the standards of the rock and roll myth, by the size of the crowds, the volume of the music, the intensity of fame, then maybe. The quiet, contemplative man who enjoys a walk in the woods seems a world away from the golden god. By that metric, one might see his current existence as a faded echo of a glorious past. But that's a profoundly shallow reading of his story, fails to see the immense strength required to survive the kind of tragedy he has endured. His life is not a story of decline, it's a story of transformation. The car crash, the unspeakable loss of his son, and the death of his best friend were crucibles that forged a new man. They forced him to seek a different kind of fulfillment, one found not in external adoration, but in internal peace. His life today is not sad. It is chosen. It's a life reclaimed from unimaginable grief and the pressures of superstardom. He traded the fleeting highs of fame for the enduring solace of family, nature, and authentic creation. The real sadness would have been if he had never changed, becoming a parody of his younger self, endlessly chasing the ghost of the golden god. Instead, Robert Plant did the hardest thing of all. He let go. He embraced change, honored his losses by living a life of quiet purpose, and found a grace far more profound than any fleeting moment of glory. His life isn't sad. It's a testament to the human spirit's power to find light in the deepest darkness. It is, in its own quiet way, a whole lot of love.